Oof. What else is there to say but oof? Pacers blown out by the Bulls in Chicago. The offense bad, the defense even worse. What on earth happened on this road trip? And oh boy, here comes our most important game of the season to date at the worst possible time. We'll get to all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, still in the United Center, where, oh boy, I don't even know what to say about what just happened to the Pacers because it was dreadful on both ends of the floor. Their defense, very poor, especially in the second quarter. Their offense, not particularly good, only scoring 103 points. And they walk out losers of 3 in a row against play-in level teams and likely teams that they feel like they should be beating. Andrew Nembhard basically saying as such after the game, teams that they feel good against. And yet they did nothing well in this game. The starting five gets benched in the third quarter. The deep reserves come in and show some fight. Way too little, too late. Oh, man. The thing about this game is I wasn't actually sure where to start because to me, the most glaring thing is kind of not what the conversation was about post-game, which was really interesting, right? You know, to me, the story of this game is the continued decline of the Pacers defense. But I will admit that it was really one quarter of this game where it was truly awful. In fact, to be that guy, again, I watched the game. I don't think the Pacers played very well. The Pacers outscored the Bulls in the first, third, and fourth quarters combined, which speaks to the point I wanted to make. They were not good on defense in general in this game, even outside of this quarter. Their second quarter on defense was so awful. I mean, just absolutely terrible. 40 points to the Bulls. Pacers only scored 21 in that frame. And again, they lost the game by 18. That was a minus 19 quarter. Like, they found answers the rest of the way. But they stunk on defense in that quarter in a way that kind of revealed what I've been seeing as just a general huge decline for the Pacers of late on that end of the floor. And I mentioned this after the All-Star break when I came back from my vacation, that I wondered, and it was one of my biggest questions the rest of the season, how good really is the Pacers defense, right? Because early in the season, weren't very good. Last year, weren't very good. Post All-Star break, they were like okay, but mostly still bad. And then they had this stretch post IST this year into January where they were legitimately pretty good. And there were some indicators, mostly opponent shooting, that was a little unsustainable, but I could watch it and tell you they look better on defense, and I bet this could hold at roughly average, maybe a little worse than that, right? Right now, the Pacers are 17th in defense after tonight. They are 0.4 points away from an above average defense. Like, they're not that far off from 14 through 20 are all pretty close, separated by about 0.7 points. They're in that tier of team. Close to average, slightly below it. And that is boosted by really good play in January. I'm setting too much scene here. They have been dreadful, absolutely awful on that end of the floor of late. Since February 1st now, they are, I'm going to scroll for a while, they are below average at 115.2. That's below their season average. And they had some better games in early February. Since the All-Star break, they are even lower than that on the defensive end of the floor. I continue to scroll. Yep, still below average, still 115.2. And in the month of March currently, where they have looked awful and continued their decline, their defensive rating again continues to fall even lower. They just haven't been good on that end of the floor for a while now. And it's something they've got to figure out. And this game exposed it in a major way. And the thing that has really popped to me about it is particularly their points in the paint allowed. 68 for the Bulls today. I mean, that is just horrible. You can't win giving up that many points in the paint. You're not going to be able to keep up with your opponents. And they are now 2-9 in games where they give up more than 60 points in the paint. Their 2 wins were in New York against New York, in early February. That game where Mathurin and I believe Haliburton were excellent, and Siakam was very good. And their other one was against the Magic in a game that Paolo Banchero, I believe, missed also in early November, right around the same time as that Knicks win. All the other games and every game outside of November for the entire season, the Pacers are winless when they give up over 60 points in the paint. 4 of the 11 times that they've given up over 60 points in the paint have come since February 1st. Those games would be the Denver game that they lost post All-Star break, the Hawks game from last Thursday. Both of those were 74, the 2 highest for the Pacers of the season. The Knicks loss on February 11th, and then again tonight, 68 for the Bulls, which would be tied for the 4th most the Pacers have given up in a game this season. In fact, 4 of their top 5 are since February 11th. So within the last month, 4 of their worst 5 points in the paint defense games. I've done 6 minutes of setting the scene and hardly talked about this game. Just to tell you, it has been noticeable how much the Pacers defense has dropped, despite this time no health issues, right? They had health issues early in the season. They were defending poorly. They got their guys back and played well on that end of the floor. Now, mostly healthy, again, missing Haliburton, but the stats say they're a better defensive team, very slightly without him. They've got to be better on that end of the floor. And they are just allowing drive after drive and then losing cutters. And that is where it continues to strike me as bad, right? This was what we talked about, in the media sphere on this podcast. Players would mention it last season when the Pacers stunk on defense all the time. The guard your yard aspect was just terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Giving up drive after drive after drive and then not being able to recover to stop said player. And that's where they would talk about connectivity with rotations and communication, all stuff like that. Today, Kobe White, layup line, 8 twos for Kobe White. Josh Giddey's been playing well since the break. No excuse for this. Layup line. He made 9 2-point shots in this game. To be clear, Josh Giddey and Kobe White both made more twos than any Pacers player made total. Siakam led the Pacers with 6 makes. He was, we'll talk about Siakam later because another head scratcher with him for me in a good way for Siakam, not the rest of the team. Like they couldn't stop either of those guys. Trey Jones, all his makes were twos. Manas Buzelis, all his makes were twos. Nikola Vucevic, all but one of his makes were twos. The Bulls just lived in the paint. And when those guys would get in far enough that the defense would rotate, Trey Jones, I thought was very good at this. Zach Collins was picking off guys well. The cutters would get free. So when the Pacers would send help or send 2 to the ball to cut off these drives, the Bulls did a good job to recognize where the cutter was coming from. The Pacers did a terrible job with the communication and rotation of that part of it. And that matches exactly what looked bad against, say, Orlando. That game they gave up 70 points in the paint. That matches what looked awful against the Hawks last week. And so a lot went very bad in this game, to be clear. I said that they won those 3 quarters together. Yeah, but I watched the game. They didn't play well. The Bulls just also weren't playing very well in those frames. And you can point to a lot of things that the Pacers did not do well in this game. They continue to look extremely disjointed without Tyrese Haliburton. They shot it awful in this game. We'll get to all this stuff in the second segment. I don't know why I'm telling it all to you right now. But to me, the biggest thing going on right now is the continued struggles defensively, and especially on this road trip without Haliburton, because I just talked about it yesterday and wrote a story about it. Like, their defense is supposed to be a little better without him. Obviously, a huge hit offensively, a huge hit. But if they can't guard either, and we know they're going to be worse on defense without him, they have very little way of winning. And the fact that they lost both those games with 4th quarter leads in Atlanta was why it was so damaging without Tyrese, because they need to win games like that, and they couldn't do it. And tonight they couldn't do anything well, and their defense was just stunningly bad to me. Nobody had it on that end of the floor, not a soul. Actually, one guy did. Johnny Furphy had it on that end of the floor. Nobody else felt like they were defending very well. No matter who was on Kobe White, no matter who was on Giddey, even Buzelis, who was 4 for 6 on twos, those guys just wiggled in or cut in or whatever. Zach Collins was finishing. Basically, only Kevin Huerter had an off night, and that's because he missed 7 threes out of his 10 misses, right? It was just awful from the Pacers on that end of the floor. They need to be better. They're not going to, I don't think anyone thinks this, get back to where they were in January, right? They will probably settle into somewhere between 15th and 20th. In fact, that's about where they've been in these stretches since, in these stretches that I'm highlighting now, right? Between 15th and 20th. 19th in the last month since February 10th, right? Which is about in the range I'm describing. A little worse than their full season number. But these last couple games have been really bad, and specifically their rim defense has been really bad. And specifically, their rim defense has been really bad because of how poorly they've been keeping guys in front of them on the perimeter. So yes, this is a rim problem, but it extends out to much more than that. It's a rebounding issue. It's a guard your yard issue. It's an identifying cutters issue, and it's a connectivity issue. The word chemistry as an issue got brought up post-game today. It's March, right? Tyrese Haliburton's amazing. Very good player. I can't believe how many people are stunned, by the way, that they're this much worse without him. Regardless, last year they found ways to win. Their schedule was not very hard, but they found ways to win without him. 7-6, even with a slightly negative net rating with him off the floor. Their net rating without him on the floor entering this game was about the same as last year. They should not be searching for answers this much, but they are. And their defense overlapping with his absence, their defensive struggles overlapping with his absence, to me, has been a huge story and was a huge issue in this game. And they just so happen to have their most important game of the year coming up tonight, which we'll talk about in the third segment. Let's talk about the offensive end, which wasn't much better. Some of that understandable, some of that not at all, as the starters get benched. So much more to get to from Pacers Bulls. Before we do any of that, we talk about Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, like most people. Balancing fit and comfort and finding the right style can be challenging. Skims changes all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Their cotton brief is fantastic, right? If you're a briefs guy like me, through and through, finding the perfect pair can be quite the challenge. But their cotton brief is very comfy, the classic fit, maxed out breathability. Something only Skims can do. If you're a briefs guy out there, trust me, can't beat this one. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and in Skims stores. Let them know we sent you after you place your order. Select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. That is skims.com/LockedOnNBA. Back here on Locked On Pacers, thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Make your second listen Locked On Bulls, where I'm sure they're talking about 58 combined points from Josh Giddey and Kobe White, which speaks to everything I just said in the first segment. Kobe White was pretty good when the Bulls were in Indy last month, and the Pacers won. Josh Giddey was not. They were both amazing tonight. Pacers couldn't stop them. Pacers couldn't do anything, and they lose the game. They have got to figure out their defense. In this game, their offense stunk too. Some people were replying to me on Twitter. I can't fault them, calling this an offensive loss. You know why it's up for debate? Because they were bad on both ends. Pacers under 40% from the field. You're not going to win hardly ever doing that. 40 for 101. The pace was kind of there. Right. In a lot of the games they lose without Haliburton, to me, what's missing is pace, their ability to up their tempo, play the way they want to play. I actually felt like that was the only thing that looked kind of normal. This game was fast paced. The Bulls want to play fast as well, which helped them get the juice into it, but they could not create or make anything. And again, Haliburton's absence is a big part of this, more so than the defense. And I talked about this yesterday. Their percentages are worse without him. 3-pointers, 10 for 40 were the Pacers. They could not hit a jumper in the first half to save their freaking lives. Their shot chart is crazy. They actually did okay early, not late, early getting into the paint. They only finished with 48 in the paint after, bringing in the reserves for the second half. They were playing well through Turner and Siakam. I will gripe about that later. Those two, the Pacers' best offensive threats in this game. But their general ball movement and shooting was just awful. Their first made jumper came after like 14 minutes of play. Myles Turner hit a long two. TJ McConnell hit a runner on the next possession, and they didn't hit another one for a while. It took them 11 attempts to make a three. That was via Aaron Nesmith. I mean, it was just comical how bad they were on jumpers. But 30 for 61 on twos is okay, but below 50% is just not going to cut it, right? That the Bulls, for example, on twos were 37 for 65. That's well over 50%, right? They tore the Pacers apart. I already went through that, but the Pacers could not make anything after an okay offensive start. 27 in the first quarter. The Pacers did not hit that number even. 27 is not even that good. 27 in all four quarters are scoring 108. They would still have lost by 15. They didn't get to 30 till the fourth, which none of their starters were in that quarter. Offense was dreadful. Now, some of this that I could shrug off if they had played hard or played good defense. Missing threes, it happens. There are games you miss jumpers, right? It's a variable thing. Especially when you don't have Haliburton, who makes them this season so far 5% easier. 5 percentage points easier, which is well over 5% easier in theory. I'm getting too semantical. They shot horribly. I guess I get that. But going away from their paint attack was very perplexing to me, right? I think Siakam scored their first 6 points. That doesn't sound right now that I'm saying it out loud. He scored their first basket. Turner scored their third basket. Siakam scored their fourth basket. Turner hit free throws after that. They were scoring early. And I only bring that up because my very first note of the game was Siakam scores easily on first possession. Buzelis is on him. My second note is everybody's jumping to stop him. Siakam pump fakes an elbow jumper. Buzelis and Zach Collins both jump at the fake and then foul him. Pacers doing great to get to the rim early. They had some good blow-bys. They had some good shot fakes. The Bulls are running by them. And the Pacers were tied at the end of the first quarter, despite shooting awful. Like, it felt like they just shoot well and they would win. And then they went away from that, right? Siakam, again, let's talk about the Bulls starting 5. Josh Giddey, Kobe White, and Trey Jones. That's 3 guards. 2 of them are kind of short, right? Some Bulls employees are going to come play basketball, so you get to hear the nice ambiance of the arena. Modest Buzelis at the 4, who's tall but doesn't have the girth to really like overpower Siakam, and Zach Collins, who was on Turner. So Siakam has a favorable matchup. Guess what? He was the only starter who shot 50% in this game. He did some good stuff. He took advantage of his opportunities. He had 13 points, which was the second most of any Pacer. Only Myles Turner had more because he actually made 3s. He made 2 of them in this game. That was good. Turner was actually doing okay in the post early. He finished 3 for 7 on 2s, but like I mentioned earlier, was doing well. He was the only guy to hit 3s. He led the Pacers with a whopping 4 free throw attempts in this game. They were not getting to the line very well. He had 15 points. Those 2 were giving the Pacers advantages, and they just couldn't get him involved after that start to the game. And I was perplexed by that. It's not like they're saying to the rest of the team, don't pass it to the post, right? They know it is effective. But for some reason, either the message wasn't getting through or players were incapable of doing so, or some factor made it not easier for the Pacers to flow into good post touches in favorable matchups. That's kind of on everybody. And that's why the post-game press conference really stuck with me. I think that at this point, the inconsistency would be maddening for anyone, coaches and players. Rick Carlisle said we've got to all draw a line in the sand and say we can't stand for this kind of inconsistency, right? Starters weren't good, and Rick Carlisle said it. They were struggling with chemistry. They were struggling with shot selection. Agreed on both accounts. They were not playing the way that they need to. He mentioned before the game without Tyrese, it's about, the way the Pacers play is unselfish, and they pass it a lot. They are leading the league in passes, but not a high turnover team. That's very impressive. That's part of why they're able to score so well, right? It works for them. That all falls apart. Now, if anybody isn't doing it very well. The leader in assists for the Pacers starters in assists was Siakam with 4. Again, Siakam played okay today. 3 for Nembhard, 3 for Mathurin, 2 for Turner, 2 for Nesmith, for a whopping combined total of 14 assists for the Pacers starters, 16 for the deep bench group that played the middle of the third quarter onward. Quentin Jackson, the Pacers leader, with 5 assists in this game. Had he made some shots, he would have been maybe the standout performer of the game for the Pacers. I mean, the connectivity part of this cannot be overstated. So last year, it was a thing that Haliburton got hurt, and then they rattled off a few wins, and some of that was light scheduling. I think their first win after he got hurt was the Wizards, right? I'm going to check their schedule now that I'm saying this so I don't, just talk out my butt. But they still found ways to win, right? They had an okay net rating last year with him on the bench, similar to last year, but they were finding ways to win. This year, they are not at all finding ways to win. Yes, Pacers' first game post-Haliburton injury, they beat the Wizards by 8. Then they played the Hawks and beat them by 18. Then they beat Sacramento thanks to great bench play. They beat Philly without him. They beat Phoenix without him. They beat Memphis without him. 2 of those wins, close wins, something that you could not find in Atlanta, right? They found ways. They are not this year. They're so far. So it's been fewer games than last year, but they're 0-4. They'd have to be 7-2 to keep pace with last season. And maybe Haliburton returns soon. I saw him warm up today. He was doing stuff. And I'm not making this so they didn't have Haliburton lost. They would have lost with him. They were terrible in every way, but something is missing right now from just like basic principle stuff, right? The second quarter was awful on defense. The inconsistency has been jarring. I put that in my story as well. I just wrote about the Pacers' struggles at Haliburton in Atlanta. They had stretches where it was like, oh, cool, they're scoring fine. And then other stretches where it was just completely dreadful and ineffective, and the Hawks would catch up or go on a run. And they can't have this inconsistency. They can't have these chemistry issues. Shot selection has been, I agree, slightly an issue, although that wouldn't really be where I would point the finger. They just look rough right now. They don't look like a team that's basically the same roster as last year. And that's why they bench a group, right? I asked Rick Carlisle about the benching of the full starting five, and that's the stuff he talked about. Wanted guys that played together and played hard, was what he said. The starters in this game were not doing that. Neesmith minus 20. All of them were minus double digits except for Siakam because the bench group was okay. Shepard was 4 for 7 in this one and made 2 threes. McConnell was 3 for 6, but he was playing in really short spurts. Tompin hit half of his shots. 2 games in a row now, by the way, where if the bench was that good in the first Atlanta game, the Pacers would have won. But it didn't happen. And so they turned away from the rotation. McConnell only played in the first half. I believe Thomas Bryant only played in the first half. And the starters played half the third quarter, and then we're done for the night. So top 7 guys played 2.5 quarters, and the top 2 of them only played in the first half. In the second half, Toppin got some burn as a small ball 5, and then all young guys or deep bench guys. So Shepard, Furphy, Quentin Jackson, Jarris Walker, AJ Dennis, Tony Bradley, and, well, I guess James Johnson doesn't count, but James Johnson close out the game. Says everything. And those guys fought and had spirit, right? I'll talk about some of the, that was kind of good stuff across this break, and I'll talk about why tonight's game against the Bucks for the Pacers is huge, but this is just a game that can't really happen, right? If you lose without your star player a few times, that happens, right? The Knicks are dealing with this right now, although I think they're beating the Kings pretty handily as I'm speaking, but the Knicks are dealing with this without Brunson right now, right? It is a thing. Teams struggle without their stars, no doubt. The Pacers are too. But it's the way they're doing it and to the extent they're doing it, and to a lesser extent, but still a relevant factor, the competition they're doing it against that has made this all so jarring, especially after some growth last year in this department. Horrible game. Pacers got to figure it out. Mood's going to shift. This was a road trip. They have 1 game at home. And then, Big Ten tournament for men's comes after the women's was there last week, and then high school state championships. I mean, they're going to be on the road again for a trip. This is how March is for the Pacers before they have a lot of home games later, but they've got to figure some stuff out. They need Haliburton back. They need to win some freaking games. Some good stuff happened, and a huge game is coming for the Pacers tonight against the Bucks. So let's talk about all that to close out today's Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, though, let's talk about WayFair. Your home should reflect your style, and with WayFair, it's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, WayFair has everything you need in one place. WayFair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece no matter your space or budget. From cozy furniture and stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves, WayFair has it all, and at prices that fit your budget. Looking for a new rug to tie your living room together? Wayfair's got a ton of stylish options at great prices. The site makes it easy to compare styles, and your order will arrive fast with free delivery. You'll be surprised to find everything from storage solutions to patio decor. It's your go-to for all things home. Head over to wayfair.com and find everything or something that is just your style today. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen. Locked On Heat, they look bad. They just lost at home to the Hornets. More evidence that the Pacers probably will not be in the play-in tournament unless the Hawks keep winning games and making that a relevant discussion for the next month or so of the season. Okay, let's start with the good stuff from this game to put a bow on this game and then talk about the Bucks. Good stuff from this game. I promise there's a few. Siakam early was good. That might be it for the starters. Turner hit some threes. He was the only guy hitting jumpers. He played with at least some level of force on offense, despite missing some twos. Not a lot else to like from any starter. Aaron Neesmith made threes. No one else did on the team. I mean, the bench had some nice shooting percentages. You didn't really feel them in any sort of meaningful way. It was good that TJ McConnell even played for the Pacers. I do wonder if Haliburton had been healthy, if McConnell might not have played. They just needed to put together any sort of rotation. I get that backwards. If Haliburton had played, McConnell might not have. That's what I meant to say. But regardless, they needed as much point guard play as they could get in this game. I would say the only standout really player or good thing-ish was Johnny Furphy. Missed all 3 of his threes, but made both of his twos, one on a nice transition drive, 8 rebounds, which led the Pacers, 3 steals. They won his minutes by 2, and he played 18 minutes in this game. He just was playing tough, right? And the bar's on the floor for successful things or things that stand out in a game like this, but Furphy gave them at least something interesting in a way that literally no one else did for the Pacers in this game. Tony Bradley was all right. He had 6 points, his first points in the NBA in 25 months, and had 2 offensive rebounds, sort of battled. That's about all I can. Quentin Jackson up the tempo again, played some okay defense, had 5 assists. No one else in the rotation played particularly well in this game, and the Pacers need that group to be better immediately because they have their most important game of the season to this point. Tonight they play the Bucks. The only games they have left against teams 3 through 6 in the standings the rest of the way are both in the next 5 days. They play the Bucks Tuesday and then again on Saturday, both back-to-backs. The Bucks will be on a rest advantage for both. Both teams not playing awesome right now. Doc Rivers, similar loathing about, I just knocked a chair over, excuse me. So similar loathing about the Bucks kind of connectivity recently, I was reading, but they're playing a little better than the Pacers, and they've been healthier of late. So Pacers, I would guess, will be considered the underdogs on Tuesday. Bucks up 2-0 in the tiebreaker hunt. If the Pacers lose either game to the Bucks this week, the Bucks clinch the tiebreaker, which means the Pacers have to be an extra game better than them the rest of the way. Exceedingly meaningful, right? I just did the standings watch stuff yesterday, if you want to hear about that. But, I mean, that's why this game is so huge for the Pacers. If they need, I think, to win at least one against the Bucks, because the Bucks schedule is really hard the rest of the way. And that is about the only saving grace for the Pacers to potentially be able to create separation from them. Although if the Pacers keep playing like this or Haliburton's going to miss any other time, they will not be able to keep up with them anyway. And what I'm talking about is completely moot, but they're close in the standings right now. And the tiebreaker is still technically up for grabs, but only if the Pacers win both games this week, which both of them were on back-to-backs for the Pacers. That New Year's Eve game where the Pacers were winning almost the whole game and got swarmed by the Bucks zone, and then Giannis hit a bunch of fadeaway jumpers, and they blew it in the fourth quarter. That one's going to eat at the Pacers, and that's why they needed to win that one. Instead, 2 toughies against a team that will certainly get up to play the Pacers, and they need to win both of them. The standings dictate it, and the Pacers need a get right, feel good, do all that kind of stuff win in the worst way. They have been just awful. This road trip was terrible. Terrible for them. 3 games against teams in the play-in spots in the East. They had not lost to either the Hawks or the Bulls this season. They had not lost to the Hawks since the start of last year. They just lost all 3 of those games and looked really rough for significant stretches of basically all 3 games. They have got to do something of note or value against the Bucks, or it's going to feel like one of their worst stretches of the season. It's not. They're not playing quite as bad as they were at times in November, but it's getting close. They've got to find some defensive success. They've got to find a way to make their offense look better. They've got to win some games. Their 2 days off after the Bucks game could be significant, especially so if they get a win. We'll cover it all right here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Thank you guys for listening and enjoying the things I have to say about a not enjoyable basketball team right now. This is my first time doing all 3 games or more of a road trip. So it was cool, and they played awful. So you can blame me if you want. Back tomorrow talking Pacers Bucks. You can find me on Blue Sky and Twitter at Tony Arisis Podcast. Has a Twitter account. It is at Locked On Pacers. Best ways to contact me or complain about the things that I have to say. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you tomorrow night.